Welcome to Coming About with David Paragamian, the podcast that dives deep into the minds of leaders who have transformed their businesses and industries, paving the way for a better future. Here's Dave.
I'm joined today by Dan DeVito, who's an accomplished chief marketing officer from not only a top 10 global pharmaceutical company, but someone who made a career pivot and then became a chief marketing officer at an emerging biotech. And I don't want to do too much of a spoiler alert here, Dan, but you're in the middle of another pivot again. So really excited to have a conversation today with you and to talk a little bit about your career, those moments that emboldened you to make the changes that you've made, and just the fun things you've learned along the way in your journey. So thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Coming About, Dan.
Thank you for inviting me, Dave. I'm excited about the conversation.
Well, why don't we start at the beginning, if you will, which is, you started your professional career in entry-level, sales and marketing role in pharma. How did that lay the foundation for the career success and the career trajectory? What were some of the things you learned in that early blocking and tackling stage of your career?
Yeah, so I started with Sanofi in their vaccines division. It was a great place to start. I mean, for me, I always wanted to do something that I felt like mattered. And it's easy to feel that way when you're working in vaccines because the better you do, the less people get sick. And what I realized very early, starting in sales and then transitioning to marketing, I was fortunate enough to do that pretty early in my career, was the heart of it. You were in the control room deciding, what were the best buttons to push to convince people to make good decisions that would help their health. So from day one, it was not only the industry, but just marketing as a job. I realized, I love influencing people, especially if the result of that influence isn't just, it's not they have less money in their pocketbook. It's they're actually healthier and they're going to live longer, more productive lives. And that's always guided me in my career decisions. And then just being at a big, there's good arguments to be made for big company, small company. My experience was starting at a really big company that had the infrastructure to train you, to support you, the resources to try the things you wanted to do. It was a great place to start because you just see so many different things. You have so many opportunities to learn how to be a marketer.
Yeah, it's funny. I started my early career. I was at Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson, and I often characterize people in a semi-humorous way, saying that's like attending Annapolis and West Point from a standpoint of the discipline of the rigor of marketing. But it's so true, right? You get those foundational building blocks. You said a lot of really smart things just in that first comment, Dan, in terms of the why. The better you do, the healthier people get. You're really helping people. And I think that's a really important thing. And I think that's a thread, obviously, that I will carry through this entire conversation. One of the interesting things I'd also like to pick up on is in your early career there at Sanofi, you made the change from a sales job to a marketing job. Was that transition easy for you, hard for you? Any observations about that, influencing one-on-one as a sales rep in your car with a bag in your hand versus influencing as a marketer trying to shape a national marketplace? Any learnings or issues with that?
It was very easy in the fact that I never wanted to be a salesperson. I came out of college thinking I wanted to be a marketer, and very lucky that Sanofi had this program where they hire people out of either undergrad or grad school, and they put you in a deliberate rotational program, and everyone starts in sales, regardless of where you're going. I remember I kind of went into sales begrudgingly, didn't think I would like it. I'm more on the introvert scale, thought it'd be hard to get up every morning and just go talk to people I don't know. I actually enjoyed it way more than I expected. I went into it like, okay, I just need to get through a year of this, but I actually enjoyed it, learned a ton. I think it's so smart that the company starts everybody there because you learn the products, you learn the customer in a way that you can't get from market research, actually being in the field. So, but I was, I'll be honest, I was counting down the days until I could be done with it at the end and move into marketing. So grateful for the time, but it was actually a pretty easy transition. And then over my career, I kind of kept that. Any marketing teams I led or built, I always was very aware of the balance of how many people on the team had actually, quote unquote, carried the bag. It didn't need to be everybody. And there was actually an argument to be made that it shouldn't be everybody. You should have some people who are classically trained marketers and who've been in other industries. But at least some of the team should have carried the bag, because you can't replace the one-on-one customer knowledge, and you also can't replace the credibility that you get with the current sales teams. I think we've all seen this. The sales team takes direction differently from someone they know have done what they do versus, just a pure ivory tower team that's studied what they do but never actually taken part in it. So yeah, the transition wasn't hard, but I think that experience shaped a lot of what I'd done ever since, both at Sanofi and in other positions.
It's so funny. Your comment resonates with me personally because, as I talked a little bit about in the book Coming About, it's interesting how oftentimes in life, experiences that we get somewhat, as you say, grudgingly or unintendedly turn out later with retrospect to be fantastic. I was a classically trained marketer, and at one point in my career when I got pulled aside and they said, "Congratulations," I thought they were about to make me a vice president of marketing. And of course, the congratulations was, "No, you're going to go be an area sales director." And I probably threw my toys out of the crib and complained and had some of that same reluctance, as you say, that you did, but turned out to be the best thing, not only for my career, but also just for me personally in terms of shaping my ability to engage with people, to manage people different from me. And as you say, your experience, it really helped you with credibility with the audience, an understanding of, well, wait a minute, is this marketing program going to work in reality, right? Because there's the whole thing of it works on the whiteboard, but does it work when the rep goes out and engages with the customer? So it is so funny how, again, with retrospect, you look back and you say, wait a minute, I may have gone in reluctantly, but that was a really great thing that was done for me. It's often said that brand management is general management. Would you agree that the nature of what you did as the head of marketing before you left Sanofi had your fingers in so many pies that you felt and thought like a general manager for your business?
100%. I think I always approach marketing from the frame as being a general manager. And I think it's because of the view of marketing and the way I was taught what marketing's role is in the organization is it's the center. I would draw people a diagram when they were early marketers with marketing in the center and every other department around it and explain how marketing set the strategy. Here's how we're going to turn this asset or this product into revenue or profit. And here's how we'll orchestrate how that value chain looks across the entire organization. In saying that, you have to be a general manager. You have to have your tentacles into everything that's going on. And I think that's a really valuable way to think about marketing versus trying to stay in your lane and just focus on promotion or just focus on sales activities. I had an early coach who worked with me a lot in my early career, and he would always kind of joke whenever there was a new CEO or a new leader of the division. He's like, they're either going to pick a man or woman from finance or a man or woman from marketing. Those are the people who become the leaders of the organization. And you're going to have a lot more fun if they pick someone from marketing versus finance. But either way, these are kind of the two center pillars of a successful commercial organization.
Well, as two longtime marketing folks, you and I guess that makes us we're the fun bus today.
I would see it that way.
I want to grab a hold of something you said at the outset about the different types of companies that you've worked for, because a little over a year ago or so, you made a strategic pivot to say, I'm going to leave this top 10 pharmaceutical company where I've achieved this level of authority as the head of marketing. And you made a decisive pivot to say, I'm going to go into a small emerging company. Can you share with me a little bit about what the catalyst for you was? What was the attraction to say, okay, hey, I've done it in this big company? Back to that diagram that you draw for junior marketers where you were at the center and you were the hub of a lot of things. I imagine when you transition into a smaller, more entrepreneurial environment, you're still at the center, but there's a little less spokes around it just because it's a much more early stage company with fewer resources. So I'm really interested to hear about the attraction and some of the things you learned when you made that pivot.
Yeah, so for me, I think about it in two steps. If I look back to what triggered the move, And the first one was the decision that I had to leave, which kind of preceded like, okay, now I'm going to start looking around. For some, it might go the other way, that you see something attractive and that's what caused you to go. But for me, it was like, okay, I had a moment where I knew I had to leave, and it was essentially the balance of time where I was learning versus just doing. I did a few different things within Sanofi. I was in therapeutics. I spent a lot of time in vaccines, but I started to get to a point where I felt like a lot more often I was just going through the motions of something I had done before, which makes it easier, but that easier is not always a good thing. I didn't feel like I was learning. I wasn't as surprised by the results of things. So I could just feel myself being just as busy, but bored. I guess there's no better word for it than that. So that's when I realized, okay, I need to do something different. And I pretty quickly checked off doing another big pharma off my list, because I had friends jump from pharma company to pharma company year after year. And basically every single one of them told me they all kind of operate the same. Like you have 6 months of excitement and then it feels like you're in the same place you were. At least that was the experience I'd heard from people. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to make this move after 16, 17 years with one company, I don't want to do like a small incremental pivot. So it's like, okay, so let's go really small, something new I can build from scratch. And if I can get into a different category, that would be great. Now, knowing that there has to be some overlap or I'm not qualified to work anywhere else if I could go a complete departure. So, looking around, it was during the pandemic. So this was 2020. And there were a lot of these small startups and biotechs getting into this respiratory space. And I'd run the franchise for the top flu vaccine. I knew flu, I knew respiratory pretty well. I was involved with COVID and RSV at Sanofi. So it's like, okay, I have an angle here where I'm maybe uniquely equipped, but it's diagnostics. It's a small startup company. I think at the time they had 4 commercial employees and needed someone to create the marketing department. It was a little scary because so much of it was different than what I had done before. That scariness was the exact opposite of the boredom I was starting to feel in my current role. So that's why I knew I had to go for it. So I posted for the job on LinkedIn. I didn't have any recruiters call me. They didn't reach out to me. I reached out to them and thought this is going to be really different. And that's what I was looking for.
I love that story. I want to grab a couple pieces of that, right? Because I happen to know that you're someone who, you mentioned it a little earlier, 17 years at one company. And I know that you're someone who your undergraduate and your MBA, I think, are from the same institution. So you're somebody who certainly is a brand loyal, dedicated person, right? So change is a big deal, and cultivate that sort of risk-taking muscle, if you will, the willingness to say, hey, I've done what I can do. I'm bored, may or may not be the right word for it, but I'm ready for a new challenge. I want to do something different. And again, after all those years in the same company where you'd been so successful, to literally smaller company, 3,000 miles away, that's a big tack in direction here in terms of the changing where the sailboat's headed. What were some of the things in your own mind about the confidence to make that decision that said, yep, I'm totally ready for this? Because you initiated it. You're the one that reached out, as you said, it wasn't one of these things where the recruiter called you and convinced you. You initiated it. So how did you build that confidence? Because I'm sure that there's a listener listening that says, how do I get the confidence to take a change in direction and change a relationship, change a job, change a geography? It takes some confidence. It takes some risk taking. How'd you do that?
You know what? As you asked the question, I don't know, because it sounds terrifying when you describe it. But no, I think it was one of those things where I was convinced I had to do it. And I think once I started going down the process, I didn't allow myself to think through like, can I do this? But I will say, just even the search process and the interview process was helpful, because I'm a marketer. So when I'm thinking about how am I going to sell myself to this company, I create a kind of a mental marketing plan. And what my unique value proposition was, I knew the commercial influenza, and you could kind of call COVID influenza adjacent. I knew that better than anyone in the world. And I'd use those words, to sell myself. There's nobody who's been in the business of flu and COVID longer or more effectively than me. Now, it sounds like hyperbole, but we deal in hyperbole a lot in marketing. So I went into it with that and then tried to explain why, based on my past experience, I think I'd be able to figure out diagnostics, be able to figure out medical device. I had moved from vaccines to therapeutics. I had actually done some smaller projects with a medical device within Sanofi. So it seemed like those transitions would be easy, and I had a core with my experience in respiratory. So maybe it was completely why I was able to make the transition, or maybe it was just a good story to tell during an interview process. Like, maybe I'll never know. But as I was going through the process, I think hearing the feedback that like, oh, that is, there was nobody in that organization who had any experience in the respiratory market. So it started to build a kind of self-fulfilling confidence, like, oh, wow, this actually is unique and they are looking for this. And they're getting excited on the other end of the Zoom when I'm describing what I had done before. So some of it was that. And then you get the job and you start on day one after, like you said, 17 years with one company, and you're absolutely terrified and hoping nobody notices how you feel like you have no idea what you're talking about. But I was marketing employee number one. So again, nobody else in the organization had that experience. So there was just those type of things, like just realize, it's like self-fulfilling realization that like, oh, wow, I actually do have a unique perspective. I actually do know how to do things that other people don't. And as you add more value and you build on it, you just get more and more confident. And I think the other piece that I'll add, more important than confidence, I think, is the humility to realize what you don't know. So I was moving to this company where, they were going to sell direct to consumer. And I had done direct to consumer in pharma, but like pharma style, where you're convincing the patient to go in and talk to the doctor. This was true. Like, we're going to sell this product on Amazon. We're going to sell directly to the consumer. We're going to go on retail pharmacy shelves. I had never done any of that. Knew I couldn't just learn that on the fly because there are people who've dedicated their whole lives to doing this. And so my first hires were an e-commerce expert and a consumer marketing person who worked at General Mills, 3M, and was the head of marketing at a major California brewery as their current role. So it's like, okay, I got to quickly build the competencies that I don't have for this to work.
I think people think that to make a change like that, like you're describing, to make a career move or a personal life move, that a person has to have this incredible reservoir of fearlessness. But as I listen to you speak, Dan, and I think about my own life and some of the stories that I wrote about in my book, Coming About, to me, confidence is like a gas tank that you fill up over time. None of us are born with this perfect reservoir of 100% confidence. We work on it over time. It's a muscle that we work on. And I want to transition from this conversation about confidence to how it applies in culture, in workplaces, in families and environments. But we're going to have to stop here. Coming up in the second part of my conversation with Dan, we'll talk about how he used TikTok to prepare him for his next big move, a month-long RV trip.
What I found was there are so many people who've taken much more extreme leaps than me. For various reasons, they got tired of their career and they decided to sell their house and all their property and possessions and travel around the country in RV for the rest of their lives, or start homesteading and growing their own food and building a farm. And it just, I think for me, it was like, I found a little bit of like, okay, people have taken this way, way further than I'm even considering, and they're fine.
This has been Coming About. We hope these conversations have left you feeling empowered and ready to take your organization to the next level. To speak with Dave about your business transformation or to learn more about Health Monitor Network, go to healthmonitornetwork.com. And don't forget to check out his book, Coming About, How We Transformed a Major Media Company and the Lessons There for You. Available wherever books are sold. Coming About with David Paragamian is a production of Advantage Audio.